Daniele, here we are gathered socially distanced at a conference being witnessed virtually, which is the exact outcome of the global phenomenon that we're in. But today, I think we should unpack it and make it a lot more gritty and bring it to the street. Daniele Zanotti is the CEO of the United Way of Greater Toronto. The United Way is a wonderful global phenomenon, and particularly here in Greater Toronto, I'm not aware of any organization that does a better job for our communities. Daniele was the driving force between bringing together 5 years ago, 5 years goes by fast, doesn't it, and all that's happened between now and then, all of the local United Ways in Greater Toronto, and now is second only to the government in terms of social impact investing in a very big community, in a very important city, in a very important country. So I'm delighted to be able to spend some time with one of our great leaders in Toronto and my friend Daniele Zanotti. Let me just start with a question, getting straight to the impact, Daniele, of the pandemic. So the pandemic has effectively, in my view, laid bare many of the cracks that might have been there before, but papered over in a healthier economic environment. What's your experience in terms of the United Way and the agencies that you support in terms of the impact of the pandemic?
So true, Darryl, that it has exposed what we have known for decades, that this place that we love, the Greater Toronto Area, for all of its greatness, also has some deep systemic issues that we've got to address. And it has magnified issues of poverty, income inequality, neighborhoods that have and some that have not. It's exposed the racial divide, particularly in specific neighborhoods. And for us at United Way, it's been very quick and concrete. So overnight, our agencies went to delivering services online. Our United Way funded 211 saw a 400% increase in the number of calls coming in. Immediately. And focused on the basics of food, mental health, financial security. Our network of 280 agencies that we fund across Peel, Toronto, and York have seen about a 40% spike in calls or online requests for support. But eerily, there's also silence in some sectors. Lack of calls from women experiencing violence at home, because you can imagine they may be forced to stay at home with their perpetrator. One particularly concerning call I received from one of our frontline agencies is they've got a worker who positions herself outside an apartment block in Toronto. And the COVID code for "I'm in trouble" is a white folded towel over the balcony. And she just sits and watches. And inevitably, in a day, a woman will go out and put that towel on. And the eerie silence of that makes me worry as well.
It gives me chills, and it reminds us, doesn't it, that we track so much data through this particular pandemic, but there's so much that we don't know. There's the proverbial behind the curtains. This conference this year is entitled Forging Resilience as we go through this environment. It's a tough question when I think about your particular mandate. How do you think about resilience with all the challenges that the COVID environment has laid down before you?
It's so critical, I think, every day, Darryl, especially for us in our sector, to wake up in the morning and feel a sense of hope and resilience. And I must say, I have seen nothing but resilience from our agencies. Overnight, turning from delivering seniors congregate dining to preparing, planning, and distributing thousands of meals to isolated seniors, or a hub in Jane and Lawrence area that went from face-to-face counseling with young people coming out of gangs to providing online counseling in partnership with Humber River Regional Hospital, where they were triaging suicidal youth to a psychiatrist. So that immediate flexibility and resilience that our agency saw. But then even on the donor side.
You had no playbook for this.
No, I mean, and they just did it immediately because it's their mission. But even on the donor side, the resilience of our donors. A gentleman who has run a restaurant in Toronto for 30 years, parents ran it, passed it over to him, COVID shut him down. And he sent a note, handwritten note to United Way with a check for $200 and said, it's all I can do, but please give it to the strength of people in this place I love. The strength of people. Like that alone gives you hope that we can get through.
It does. And it's going to take a lot more of that resilience. And we've just talked about the reaction to the disruption that we never saw coming. We go back a couple of years and think about what more we could have done. Could the profound impact that you're talking about here have been buffered anymore? Could this crisis on the street level been averted any better than it has? What would we have needed to do even better?
Look, I can't help but think, so my Uncle Frank was my daycare by day when I was growing up. He was a janitor at the Toronto District School Board by night, and in the morning he would come and be my daycare while my parents went off to their 2 jobs. And while I was having brekkie, he was getting ready to go be a handyman, a precarious job he also held in a little apartment. I'll never forget, we go into the apartment, he has to fix some stuff, and this lady comes out screaming, Frank, there's a flood in the basement. We run down to the basement, there's water everywhere, I'm throwing towels, and he says, go turn off the main water valve. I wish we would have collectively focused more on the water valve. We're so focused on the immediacy of somebody coming to the homeless shelter, somebody looking for food at the food bank, a kid in crisis, and we're spending so little time, Darryl, on the systemic issues. Good jobs, affordable housing, neighborhoods that work for people. Those systemic issues, if we could just spend time on that, we'd be doing less of throwing towels on the water.
I want to come to an initiative that you and I have tried our best to grasp onto, our famous ILIO initiative, in a moment. But just before we go there, because I think it relates very directly to what you were just talking about, you often talk about place-based intervention, and you use the language poverty by postal code.
Yeah.
You just, for this audience, can you unpack what you mean by that?
So often when we think about change or helping, we think about people as the individual unit or families. And while that's important, what our research at United Way shows very clearly is that place matters, local matters. And if you want to make change, you got to get into the granularity and nuances and uniqueness of neighborhoods. And so about a decade and a bit ago, United Way put out a report called Poverty by Postal Code. And it showed, shockingly, that poverty was sticky and stubborn in specific neighborhoods. And we know where those are. And yet, even though 65% of poverty was in those outer neighborhoods, only 30% of social services and infrastructure was in those neighborhoods, and 65% was in the downtown core. So United Way, thanks to BMO being our first partner to get out into those neighborhoods, United Way started pushing our services and support into those neighborhoods. And within a decade, thanks to partners like BMO, we inverted our funding so that 65% of our investments are now in neighborhoods in the outer suburbs, and the remaining 35% in the downtown core. Together, we've built 7 hubs, Darryl. Yeah. BMO being our lead partner. 7 hubs that house hundreds of agencies in one place. We've trained thousands of residents in those neighborhoods to get together and lobby and support their own strength. with over 250 resident groups that have percolated. So this focus of not individuals as the unit of change, but neighborhoods is so critical if we want to turn the GTA into the place we love.
And back then, Daniele, we talked about building better neighborhoods. And
Right.
we talked about this hub strategy that you just referenced. A couple of years ago, I recall you and I sitting down together. We didn't have a name for it at the time, but we did come up with a name, or maybe people helped us who were better at this than you and I. But we called it the Inclusive Local Economic Opportunity Table, ILEO for short. Maybe you could describe for this audience what's different about this particular. I always thought about it as an evolution of our Building Better Neighborhood strategies and the hub. But we decided, you and I and others, we had some amazing help from the community here to do something a little bit different. Why don't you describe what's different about the approach?
I'll never forget when you and I first met. You were new as the CEO of BMO. We came in and talked about the evolution of our neighborhood strategy, how we had identified these postal codes, built social infrastructure, and then you kind of leaned back in your chair and you said, so what? We've still got this checkerboard of neighborhoods that have and don't. And you asked pointedly, what is the single biggest issue that people want in their neighborhood? And it was very clear, jobs, economic development. But we didn't have a way, as great as United Way and the social services are, we didn't have a way to do that. And you said, BMO can bring corporations to the table. We need something different. Thus came ILEO, Inclusive Local Economic Opportunity. And your unique ability to bring 20 of the country's top corporate leaders together to do what only they could do corporately in neighborhoods.
And where do you think it'll take us from here? Because we've been working with your knowledge, your data, your history, your impact on communities, and your relationship. Maybe talk a little bit about the community that we've chosen and what we hope to accomplish. And maybe if you could, finish off with whether or not you think it'll be scalable. Because I remember you and I talking about, can we create a model here that will be scalable to use in other places, Toronto or otherwise?
I fundamentally believe that not only is this the model for United Way as we go forward, and thank you for that, but I do believe it is a blueprint that we can take to communities and neighborhoods right across the GTA, right across Canada, and I know BMO is doing that in Chicago as well. Because what we've done is brought corporate leaders, community, and the city of Toronto together. And when we think about neighborhoods now, we're talking planning, social infrastructure, and economic development. So together, with the city of Toronto, we chose the Greater Golden Mile. This once 1950 destination in Toronto, in Scarborough, the place where the first industrial parkway was built. But now, as you drive through it, just a series of big box stores. We selected that because it's got a unique public-private partnership. It's going to have the largest investment of homes, businesses in the next 10 years. And we felt it was prime to demonstrate how do business, community, and government work together.
Yeah. Couple of examples that I didn't even see coming when we got to work on this. Your team has been such a powerful force behind what could be different, what could we do, bringing the power of all those groups that you just talked about now together. The construction joint venture that our great friend John Beck is leading, the charter that we've got Dean Connor leading and Andrew Pickersgill. Could you describe those two in particular? Because I think there's lots of things we could talk here about on ILEO, but I think those are really interesting examples of how we think we're going to make lasting impact on the community.
The corporate charter, as you mentioned, led by Dean Connor and Andrew Pickersgill, is already a signatory of 18 corporations who have agreed that they want to do place-based work in the Greater Golden Mile. social procurement, hiring locally from that community, offering training and apprenticeships, potentially looking at fair wages from that neighborhood as well. And all of that is a series of potentials that companies could sign up for, but very focused in the Greater Golden Mile. We've already seen that Sun Life is recruiting staff, training and hiring from the Greater Golden Mile. And as signatories come on, they are creating their own unique corporate agenda and linking it to their own CSR strategy, but place-based in the Greater Golden Mile. The joint venture led by John Beck and Aecon, a magnificent construction partnership where Aecon owns 49% of a new entity and the community owns 51%. And so all construction bids that Aecon receives will not only be sourced and hired from within the Greater Golden Mile, but all of the revenue and all of the wages will go back to people who live there and back into investments in that neighborhood. Unique, never before done in an urban setting, but thanks to Aecon's leadership and a group of agencies that have come together, we're weeks away from a new legal entity, and we're months away from hiring the first construction workers from the Greater Golden Mile who live in the mile, will work in the mile, and revenue will go back into that community.
I think there's been tremendous progress. Credit to you, your colleagues at the United Way, all of the corporates that we called together that day a couple of years ago to get us started, and the government agencies and the city planners who have helped us get moving on this. And I do agree with you. I think we do have something that's scalable and successful. We're already starting to work, as you referenced, in Chicago with the United Way in Chicago and with Mayor Lightfoot there as well. Let me shift gears. You talked about a restaurateur who was committed to you despite the challenges of that person's business and life. I've also heard you talk about the transition from donor to partner. Talk a little bit about what you mean by that and what do you think it looks like in the future?
So many examples, Darryl, beginning with BMO, of corporations who are not only making significant financial contributions with the big paper checks that we used to get, but are literally rolling up their sleeves and saying, we want to partner with you quite differently. And so the work that BMO has done with us on ILEO, as an example, and all of the staff support that you've provided on neighborhood work. McCarthy Tetro, who not only made a commitment of $5 million around inclusion now and diversity, but is working in neighborhoods with Black, Indigenous, LGBTQ communities, trying to invest the dollars right in. PwC, who is sitting with us at ILEO and has brought their skill set to bear and is mapping out an entire evaluation framework for us so that we can monitor this ILEO work and then scale it to other communities. Gone are the days. Gone is the United Way, where we're your September friend. We come in and say, let's do a campaign, let's write a check, and let's put money into the community. Now we're saying, we need your heads, hearts, and hands. And companies are stepping up in completely different ways with employees who want to give their time and their talent, but haven't found ways to do that. U of T, Merrick Gertler sits at our table with us, and as he's watched this unfold, he has said, what about a partnership with the United Way and U of T School of Cities? And within weeks, we're opening a certificate program where high potential employees from corporations can go to U of T, sit next to community leaders, and talk about solving local issues together. And at the end, they come out with a U of T certificate. This is a very different engagement that we're seeing. It's the only way we're going to make change.
Yeah, and that is real partnership because we're integrating all of those pieces. Let me go narrow and short term here with you on one question, and then I'm going to finish more broadly. You did say that this isn't just the September Friend, but it is the campaign right now.
It is
I think your campaign is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the world historically. Congratulations. You've had leadership that I think others frankly aspire to when I travel around our various geographies. What's unique about this year's campaign, and how can the people who are watching and listening to this particular webcast help?
I remember I called you when COVID hit, and you said a line that I have been using each day. Now more than ever has never been more appropriate. Now more than ever. And we don't need to say it to anybody because people get it. They see it, they feel it. But this campaign is fundamentally different. Not only are our agencies experiencing immense change and supply with different demand, but our donors are experiencing their financial situation different. And as much as we're saying there's a need and we want you to be with us, we also want to be sensitive about people's reality. What we're seeing, Darryl, is this is not about storytelling anymore and explaining to people now more than ever. It's actually engaging people in, here's ways you can help. Volunteer at a local food bank, socially distancing, of course. Get a pen pal with a senior and send them a note once a week, or be an online mentor. But this campaign is more than just the financial. It's getting to the very core of the city we want when we recover. And this uprising of care, this generosity that we can help instill, this local love, hopefully will position us better post-COVID in our recovery.
So there are a lot of ways to contribute. So I join you and all of your colleagues this year on the campaign in challenging everybody to contribute in any way that they can, and I'm going to do the same with our workforce here at our company. Last question for you, and it's a personal one. You are an optimist. You are one of the most optimistic people I've ever met, and yet you have to face some of the most challenging circumstances in our society, and this year it's even more profoundly the case. How do you put those two things together? What keeps you optimistic and what makes you tick?
Dawoo. Dawoo lives on the 27th floor of a community housing building in North Etobicoke. She gets up every morning, Darryl, at 3:50 a.m. She writes a note to her 10-year-old daughter. Give grandpa his meds at 8 a.m. Let the United Way seniors worker in at 10. And don't forget to let your brother online for his counseling at 2 p.m. Love, Mom. Then she jumps on the 4:30 a.m. Islington bus, goes to her first job as a personal support worker in a senior's home. At 3:30 in the afternoon, she goes to her second job, stocking shelves at the local grocery. And if she's lucky, she's home by 10:30. Enough time to tuck in her 94-year-old dad, sit with her 17-year-old son who's got voices in his head and see how he's doing, and then give her tired 10-year-old a hug. Every frickin' day. Dawoo gives me hope because she's strong and she's got a strong family. And sure, United Way is wrapping support around her, but we've got strong people in strong neighborhoods that are struggling to survive. And if we can just provide some wraparound support, she's going to stay strong. And we, as a GTA, will stay strong because of her and people like her. She gives me hope.
I can't think of a better place to leave it, Daniele. That is a great story of hope and a great story of purpose. Thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniele Zanotti, local hero, a great leader, and a great friend. Thanks for joining us.